the Met declared that they are bringing charges against Liam O'Hannig,
Or Mo Chara.
Mo Chara, one of the three members of Kneecap, for the alleged display of a Hezbollah flag at a gig in 2024, and for the alleged chanting "Up Hamas, Up Hezbollah." He's being charged on counter-terrorism terrorism offences. Kneecap also due to play a gig in London tomorrow.
Yep.
So that is bound to be an interesting spectacle, to say the least.
It will be. And shall we read what Kneecap's response is to
course.
this? They say that we deny this offence, in quotation marks, and will vehemently defend ourselves. This is political policing. This is a carnival of distraction. We are not the story. Genocide is.
So that statement gets to the root of what's going on here, is that for some strange reason in the United Kingdom in 2025, a group of 20-something-year-old rappers are being held to a higher standard than the government, the Israeli state, the defense ministers, foreign ministers, whatever ministers in Israel that are actively using the language of ethnic displacement and genocide. And instead of holding those people to account, or at least for having some moral consistency over the last 18 months, 2 years, there has been this effort to trawl through old footage from gigs of, again, a music group to see whether a music group is a pro-terrorist organization. It is absurd to have this kind of debate around people whose music they've always been a controversial band. They have always been a band that treads the line of acceptable political discourse or radical political discourse. It has been known for a very long time that's what they do. Even in their earliest days, they had their posters of Arlene Foster and Boris Johnson on a bonfire with fireworks strapped to them. Why were they not investigated for terrorism charges then? That was the prime minister of the country that they are governed by, and the first minister of the country that they lived in, that they were maybe, if this is terrorism, that could be seen as inciting violence. Why is this coming out now? It's a furore around a banner that they had at Coachella that, by the way, they had at every single gig for the last year. They did it at Glastonbury twice. There was no controversy around it then. For some reason, you make it to America, and then concerts that you've done in the UK are then put under scrutiny. It's just all very confusing and all very twisted. And whether, again, the charges are there. Liam Og is now, we don't is he going to be on stage tomorrow? What's he going to say on stage tomorrow? Is it going to make things better or worse? It's certainly going to add something to the discourse. But all that's happening now is Kneecap are just being promoted further, and they're getting more notoriety, and they're getting more kind of they've capitalized off of controversy for their entire career. The beginning of the career, I'm sorry, I'm aware that I'm speaking a lot now and you've not said anything in a while, but since the beginning of their career, they were banned from Irish radio before they'd even released an album. They, as I said about the Boris Johnson, Arlene Foster poster, the bringing the British government to court for removing funding from them. All these sorts of things, they've always kind of treaded the line of controversy and acceptable debate and acceptable political thought. And this is kind of a distraction from what they genuinely believe in. Because whether they believe in, if you were to ask me if these guys are going to southern Lebanon to actively push the border of northern Israel back, I would say they're not doing that. They're not terrorists. They're artists that have said something on stage in the heat of the moment allegedly said something on stage in the heat of the moment. That is all being used as a way to move the dial and move the narrative and move the conversation away from what's actually happening and what they're actually voicing.
I totally agree with them when they say that it is a carnival of distraction. Should he allegedly have picked up and flown a Hezbollah flag on stage at a concert? Absolutely not. That was a mistake. But when they say we're not the story, genocide is, they're absolutely right. When you consider who's committing crimes, who's committing terror. I mean, Starmer yesterday in the Commons was asked by Kirsty Blackman, why is the government still selling Israel parts of F-35 jets? And Starmer said, we're not selling the parts to Israel. We're selling them to America, who are then selling them to Israel, which is a bit like, oh, I didn't shoot the guy, I just handed him the gun, knowing what he was going to do with it. And when you consider that since October 7th, Israel has killed 17,400 children in Gaza, it does raise the question of why are Kneecap the ones here charged with terrorism?
Especially considering, like you mentioned the thing of Kirsty Blackman yesterday, and I mean, I think the guys touched on it yesterday. Actually, will we just play the clip of the interaction at PMQs yesterday?
If the Prime Minister agrees that the Israeli government starving children to death is monstrous, why does he think it's okay for the UK to continue to sell Israel the equipment for the fighter jets to drop bombs on these starving children?
What we contribute into a pot is parts for fighter jets. And if we were to stop that, they couldn't be used by other countries in the other conflicts, including those in which we are involved. It doesn't know the detail at all. They're not sold directly. They go into a pot. If we were to stop that, they wouldn't then be available to others around the world who desperately need them in the conflicts they're engaged in. And that's why we won't do it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What we learned there was, well, it was more meat on the bone to the question of UK complicity in certainly in arming Israel. People like David Lammy, Hamish Falconer have long kind of prevaricated on that question. And Keir Starmer, for the first time, is then including the presence of a pot that the UK puts ejector seats into and parts for fighter planes, and kind of excusing that these things, because we put them there, and it could be the Ukrainian government that takes an ejector seat, or it could be the American government that takes an ejector seat, and we couldn't possibly know if it's going to Israel or not. It's a bizarre kind of justification of your complicity in what's going on. It doesn't matter if it's a gun or a bullet or a helmet or an ejector seat. You are in some way. I mean, I think it's something like 15% of all F-35 fighter parts come from the United Kingdom. How can you possibly say that you are actively and consciously trying to prevent what Israel is doing, whilst going through every single loophole that you can to continue giving them the means to continue their bombardment and destruction of Gaza?
Exactly. And the pot that he's referencing is Lockheed Martin's Air Force Plant 4 in Fort Worth, Texas, which has been integral to Israel's procurement of fighter jets. I mean, how difficult would it be to say that we're not going to export any F-35 parts to any plant assembling them to then sell, or who has contracts with Israel? They could easily do that, easily. But they're choosing not to. And I think it's just the attitude of like distancing is really strange. We had David Lammy as well responding to Zara Sultana the other day in the Commons when she asked about genocide in Israel. And David Lammy responded with, oh, Zara, you just want a clickbait headline. And she was saying, well, actually, no, I'm asking quite a serious question about the government's policy on this. I mean, should we just have a listen to that as well?
Yeah, why not?
Between October and December 2024, the government approved over £127 million in export licences to Israel, exceeding the combined total under the Tories for 2020 to 2023. These licences, granted after the government's so-called temporary suspension, include components for lethal F-35 fighter jets. Jets Israel is now flying at 5 times the usual rate, decimating Gaza. Children are starving, families have been wiped out, hospitals destroyed. Yet the government in court claims that there is no evidence Israel targets civilians. The Foreign Secretary is personally responsible and refuses to ban all arms sales to this genocidal state. So, like many across Britain, I have to ask the Foreign Secretary, how do you sleep at night?
Well, the Honourable Lady has raised figures that I don't recognise. She's raised once again the issue of arms sales to Israel. I banned arms sales that could be used in Gaza. I know that the Honourable Lady is keen on clickbait, but I'm not going to be baited from this dispatch box.
It's bordering on disgusting the way the UK government, and look, Metropolitan Police, semi-independent from the UK government, we're not saying that Keir Starmer is charging Liam Og for potential terrorism offences. But it is an interesting contrast between the two, that this is what... And also during that debate that Lamy was replying to Zara Sultana on, the nerve to turn around to Priti Patel after she asks a question about... Now, the question in the context of the UK then finally taking a stand against Israel, to then reply to Priti Patel, who was kind of continuing the line that Labour and the Conservatives have kind of had for the last year and a half, 2 years, for Lamy to turn around and act as though he has been a pro-Palestinian voice, stop the war voice, condemning Israel voice for the last 2 years, the nerve to act as though you have been the paragon of righteous and moral standing against the Israeli government's actions in Gaza. It is bizarre to see how the government themselves and the British media as a whole has kind of just flipped the switch on how they talk about this, and how they kind of approach the conduct of the Israeli government. It's no longer this, well, but they're trying to rid Gaza of Hamas.
Israel
It's no
is trying
longer
to defend
that.
itself.
Yeah, it's been that for 2 years, despite how many people have died, despite how many children have died, despite how little aid gets through, despite the active and regular statements of like purposeful ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in Gaza. And now, because the government has changed their tune on it, the media is starting to change its, but not even so much, just still parroting government lines, just in a different way. It's just leaning in a more favourable position to the Palestinians now.